What's going on, broskies? GG here. Welcome back to another video. And today I got a spicy one for you guys. A Christmas prediction tier list. This should be setting the meta going forward into 2024. So let's see if I'm right. Let's see if I'm wrong. Let's get into it. So we got our 4 categories here as usual that we're going to be using. Starting off with the top tier category, of course, is going to be making it rain. So your number 1 players are going to be needing that money bag to make it rain on all these other players, because they're going to need to drop bank in order to get all the tier 1 decks. Unfortunately, there's going to be a handful of tryhards that's going to be rocking all those decks, and then you're going to have like the 99% of guys who's going to be rocking everything else. Then you got better luck next time, and that's what the money bags are going to be telling you, because you got the tier 2 decks. They got the better deck, they know it, and they're going to be cocky about it. So better luck next time. Maybe if you drop a couple of more hundred, you might be able to say that to somebody else. Then you got King of Locals, because my boy, that's as far as you're going to be going. You're not going to get any further than your locals. You might be the king of the shop, but the moment you try to hit regionals, it's a wrap for you. And then, last but not least, we got Pay the Bills. Paying the bills, more important than buying these decks. Absolutely would not recommend this current meta buying any of these decks in this category, because it's just not worth it. Alright, my boys, so we starting right off the bat with Dino. With Dino Wrestler back at 2, the deck is definitely going to get a lot more better now. A little bit more consistency. That's exactly what the deck needed. Only problem is it's still not enough to make the deck reliable. The deck is still going to be suffering from being slow. The most important card on the deck is still on the ban list, unfortunately. I've been seeing there's already test playings with this deck already with the new Dino Wrestler build going on. It is good, it is strong, and has a lot of potential, but unfortunately it's not going to be making any major impact on the new meta going forward in 2024. So with that being said, I definitely think Dinos, with the potential they got with Dino Wrestler, I mean, I would probably just say King of Locals, my boy. I don't see this deck doing any further better than this. They still compete pretty good, but they're not really hitting anything else. I would honestly even say push it more towards Pay the Bills, but I've seen what the deck's capable of, so I definitely think at least they deserve King of Locals. So next we got Fire King, my boys. Now this is the hottest, freshest deck on the market right now, and hands down the deck with the most potential, besides Centurion coming up next. And this is what I'm going to be going into the new meta with, Fire Kings. I just finished RDA. I'm going into Fire Kings. Fire is taking over the new meta. Everybody knows that 2024 is the year of the fire. So everybody's going to be getting their hands on as much fire decks as possible, especially with all the support coming out. So with that being said, I definitely think Fire Kings are going to be making it rain this meta. And the reason why is Sinful Spoils. Sinful Spoils, hands down, is the best splashable engine in any deck at the moment here for the next meta going forward in 2024. If you got like $500 to drop. A decent amount of these decks could easily make it to the Make It Rain category, but it really depends on your playstyle if you want to go. There are different options of how you can go around playing this. You can cut this deck down drastically, buy the structure decks for 30 bucks, and then go about rocking Dogmatica in the Fire Kings. I've seen a lot of good plays off that. It's definitely budget friendly, and this way you're not breaking the bank and keeping it within $100 range, give or take. Next we got Centurion. So Centurion is the newest, greatest synchro deck on the market now. I've seen what this deck is capable of. It's definitely really, really good. And I've seen how it's playing in YCS and the potential this deck got. But I think there's some copium going on with this deck. Everyone thinks it's going to be destroying the next meta going forward. I definitely think the deck has a lot of potential, but the only problem with the deck is right now is hand traps is very strong against this deck. If you Ash and Emperor and 1 or 2 cards in the beginning plays, you're kind of done for with this deck. And with that being said, going into the new meta, we have Drone Lockbird that's going to be the #1 hand trap going forward into 2024. And everybody's still going to be rocking Ash and Imperm if not. So with that being said, Centurion, as great as it is, I don't think it deserves that #1 spot right now that everyone's saying it is. So I'm going to have to put in the better luck next time. And specifically just for that hand trap. If you open it with 1, maybe even 2 hand traps, the game's basically yours. So Centurion, I can't give it to you this time. Next we got Runic. Best going first deck, hands down in my opinion. And as we definitely saw with the past YCS, Josh, reigning champ now, rocking the Runic deck. Definitely shows the capability. There's a lot of issues with the deck. A lot of things that needs fixing that's not going to be able to get done this meta going forward. And I feel like with the changes that's done recently with the new ban list, it kind of brings the Rune deck down just a notch, but not too far down. Josh definitely got a big brain to play this deck. I feel like 99% of us won't even be able to accomplish the plays that he did or even be able to maneuver the deck the way he did. The deck has a lot of splashable engines that you can play with. You can definitely go break in the bank, or you can go as budget as you want. We have at least 5 or 6 different engines that's capable with this deck at the moment, so it fits a lot of different play styles depending on how you like to play. And with that being said, it's definitely one of the decks on this list right now that gives you the most variety of what you can choose for. But in regards to this lineup here, I definitely gotta say at this moment is going to be king of locals, my boys. And I would definitely even put it above Dinos, because I feel like with that many engines and you know who you're playing in your locals, you can definitely tweak and tune the deck to make sure you're winning your locals all the time. Branded is up next, and I got a love-hate relationship with this deck. So Branded definitely got some major big boss playing cards going on with it, with Jade being the #1 problem I think in the deck that most people deal with. I definitely got some of my boys who rock Branded and splash it into some of their decks as well, and I've seen what the deck is capable of. It has a lot of faults with it going forward, especially with some of the new cards coming out in the next meta in this coming year, which is definitely going to be breaking this deck down a little bit further. But do not sleep on this deck. It's still definitely consistent. It can bring out some crazy boss monsters, and at the end of the day, it's fusion. Who doesn't love fusion? There's still a lot of weaknesses and outs to it. It falls heavy to hand traps. There's definitely workarounds, and I've seen they have a lot of counters, but I don't believe it's going to be able to withstand the test of time going into the new year. So I would most likely still have to put Branded at better luck next time, right behind Centurion, because it dominated the meta. I feel like the deck is too slow and it's not going to be able to withstand the new supports coming out for newer decks in the future. Chimera, same thing as Branded in my opinion. I feel like it's a slightly better deck. Depending on the situation, it could honestly be slightly worse as well. With Chimera, you kind of lock yourself into that engine depending on the lines that you take, so that alone will kind of handicap you. And depending on your opponent, you might prefer just having a straight Branded Despia build, because that will give you the opportunity to just go consistently into your extra deck and get all those fusion cards. Now Chimera, like I said, it could be a handicap, it could be a positive thing, but I personally would put it right behind Branded Despia here, just because of that potential of locking you in when you don't need to be locked in. Branded Despia got a lot of good fusions, a lot of outs in the extra deck, and a lot of different tools it could tap into. Chimera, it's great and all, but I feel like the restriction there is not exactly what I personally would prefer. Dragon Link, my boys. So Dragon Link is gonna be one of my all-time favorite decks. Dragon, I feel like anytime a dragon card comes out, or a dragon pack, there's always going to be support in the future, and it's always going to be making the deck a lot more better and consistent. It may not be top in regionals and hitting YCS, but dragons is one of the archetypes that will always have that support in the future. It could be 5 years from now, but that support will always be coming for Dragon Links. And I feel like this deck will always get stronger. It may even get to the point where it can hit top YCS, even win a YCS one day, who knows. But right now, I don't think that it's been doing anything impactful in the meta lately where it's threatening or really been making much changes and shifts to force players to change their playstyles or choose different lines. So with that being said, I don't think going into 2024 for the first half of the year, the deck's going to be any well. But there are a few cards that you can splash into the deck that's going to be coming out next year that could potentially bump the deck up a little bit stronger. And depending on the kind of playstyles you have, we got to see what we can do with this deck. Definitely don't sleep on Dragon Links, but as of now, I'm going to have to put it as King of Locals. And at the moment, it has to be the best King of Locals deck because it's still Dragon Links at the end of the day. We have to pay our respects. It's going to be the most consistent and powerful over Runic and Dinos at the moment. Exosisters is up next. So I already have a strong feeling about this deck going into the new meta, and I'm going to automatically put it just about maybe right there. And the reason why I'm putting in King of Locals is because going into the new meta in 2024, I've been seeing a lot of shifts in new playstyles, and it looks like we're going to be very graveyard heavy, which is good for the deck, but also bad because with being graveyard heavy meta, that means we're going to be playing for that, and we're going to be playing a lot of graveyard counters as well. So depending on the playstyles and how strict and tight certain decks could be, if we're running counters for the deck, that's kind of killing the deck in a sense. So it's like it may get some major boosts, but at the same time, you're kind of like having a double-edged sword, and you might get countered hard depending on who you're going up against. So it's hard to tell right now where this deck is going to be heading going into the new meta, but King of Locals is, I honestly think, is the best shot for this deck right now. It's still really good, very playful, but nothing is going to be changing for this deck at the moment. Floowandereeze is another deck with a love-hate relationship. I have one of my close friends who played this deck for his life, and he absolutely loved this deck. And what this deck was capable of within the past 2 years, it's crazy. And for probably the cheapest deck I have on this list right here, it is ridiculous what this deck is capable of. Definitely over the past 2 years now, it's been knocked down the list drastically. It was at one point, I feel, tier 1. Definitely not anymore. If you're new to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or you're just on a crazy tight budget and you just really want to play and have some fun, and if maybe you just love the deck in general, but it has to be the best hands down budget competitive deck on the market. And because of that, I still have to give it to Floowandereeze and put it at better luck next time. It's definitely not going to be anywhere close to these, but it's still a very good competitive deck nonetheless. And the only problem with this deck is back row heavy decks is going to be its weakness. And I feel like a lot of decks nowadays are running back row heavy, and because of that, I feel like it can easily out Floowandereeze. But with the right pilot, there's a lot of capable hands that can be played with this deck to kind of work around that. You're not going into regionals and YCS with this expecting to win, but you're going to be doing some major damages nonetheless. Plus, you could pick up like the entire deck for like 50 bucks at this point, and that's kind of a steal no matter who you are trying to play. Infernoble right now has one of the craziest play styles and potentials in the meta. I feel like a lot of people is not giving this deck the credit it deserves. Pax is like the known player for this deck, and if you don't know Pax, he's like at this moment the second best player because Josh won YCS, of course. And Pax has consistently been putting out a new build for this deck and been showing the capabilities of what this deck can do. So he alone can show how strong this deck possibly be, and I feel like it definitely takes a really good pilot for this deck. It's not an easy deck to go into, and to make it meta worthy, you definitely have to take your time, pick the right plays, and choose the correct lines depending on who you're going up against. But I feel like this deck definitely needs to get more credit that it's being given to, and because of that, I will be putting it right here in the better luck next time. I don't think you're going to be doing some crazy wins per se off of it, but in the current tier list I have set up right now, it's definitely very high up there. It has a lot of outs, a lot of tools that it can hit in the extra deck, and I just feel like there's a lot of capability. Like I said, it just takes the right pilot for this deck, and sky's the limit for you. Mannadium, my boy. So this deck, such a good deck and had so much potential in the past as well. This deck could have definitely been one of the best deck in my opinion, and I wish it was because I would have jumped on it. I am a die-hard Machine fan. I love Earth Machine deck, but Mannadium is definitely one of those decks I would have so played if it was actually compatible. I feel like it's still good, it can still do plays and get out of a lot of tough situations, but it does not have the consistency and it does not have the speed. And because of that, I'm gonna have to unfortunately put it just about maybe right here. And I still think Mannadium is better than Branded, Chimera and Floowandereeze because it has so much amazing tools to it, especially with the new support now off the ban list. It's definitely going to speed up the deck a little bit more and give us some more power it desperately needed for a while. Maybe in the future the deck will get better and we'll get more support. Machines is just like dragons, they will always get support, but I don't see it getting any better than what it really is right now for a while, so I feel like it's going to be staying here, if not getting bumped down maybe to King of Locals. So we got Labyrinth next, and everybody knows what Labyrinth is capable of at this point, and it's still making top YCS, doing some crazy plays, a lot of splashable engines. It's amazing what this deck is capable of and how easy and also very hard it can be at the same time, depending on how much time you put into this deck. I definitely have to give it to Labyrinth and put it to making it rain. It can be a crazy expensive deck if you wanted to, but it also can be a somewhat affordable deck as well, depending on the engines you're going to be splashing into it. But Labyrinth has been making top locals, top regionals, and top YCS for a long time now, and there's a reason why. Everybody who plays Labyrinth knows the capabilities of this deck, and I don't see Labyrinth getting worse anytime soon. New support's coming out in the future, and I feel like this deck is just going to get even better. So who knows what the potential is for this deck, but I definitely think it's still tier 1. Alright, so Math Mech, my boys, this is going to be hands down the first deck on the pay the bills. As soon as everybody saw Math Mech Circular got hit on the ban list, it was a wrap. The deck was already done for. Konami did not have to do this, but they did it anyway. And unfortunately now the deck is just completely done. I don't know what Math Mech players are going to do. They're kind of like holding on for dear life with this card, the way they were running these decks, but now the deck's not even playable. I've seen some players try to build a deck without Circular. It's definitely not good, but you know, you can take those Math Mech players out of the game at this point. You're probably going to see a few of them run your locals still, but when you see them, expect to get that W because they're not going nowhere with that deck. Kashtira, so the #1 King of Games deck for the last meta, just dominated consistently over everything. Before we had Rescue Ace, before we had Unchained, it was the #1 undefeated, most annoying deck you can possibly go up against. Oh, Kashtira, how have you fallen? I cannot believe Kashtira has finally got the day where I can go ahead and put it right here in the King of Locals. Because my boys, that is as far as you're going to be going with this deck. Kashtira has Unicorn back at 3, but with that, it's still not going to be enough to even get this deck off of the locals. It is lacking tremendous power. Rise Heart is gone, it's lost its support, and I honestly feel like it's just not worth playing. I've seen so many players try to run new and different playstyles, especially with Unicorn now, and the deck is definitely fun and it's still very, very capable, but nothing that's going to be changing up the meta or having people scared or worried the way it used to when a lot of players used to play when it was tier 1. So locals, probably the furthest the deck's gonna get. It's gonna take a really good pilot to get this deck higher than what it is now. But Kashtira, I think your days are just done. Because this deck basically got away with the least amount of damage from Konami. I mean, they took Sleeping Memory away to 1, and I mean, it's not even going to be a major hit. It's no longer what I feel is going to be tier 1, because I've seen what the deck is doing now with that hit, and it did definitely slow the deck down and kind of break a little bit of the inconsistency. So I do feel like this deck is now going to be on the better luck next time, and I honestly feel like, yeah, I feel like it's gonna be right behind Centurion, because Centurion just has so much potential, and Pearly is just Pearly. Everybody who knows this deck, who's gonna go up against this deck, studied it, knows its ins and outs, knows its weakness, and now the fact that the deck just got hit even harder, don't sleep on it. It's still gonna surprise you and get a lot of good W's, but the deck is a lot weaker now, and that opens up the door for us. Yo, Rescue Ace! Rescue Ace has to be, in my opinion, still one of the best decks on the meta going forward in 2024. And I am going to even put Rescue Ace. I'm going to put Rescue Ace right here behind Fire Kings. And I am so happy I can finally say that. Because Rescue Ace got hit twice. Not once, but twice on the ban list. And with that being said, it's still a crazy, crazy competitive deck going forward. But now the deck is drastically a lot slower. Players are going to have to pick a lot of new different lines and choose those lines very carefully because they're going to be more locked in now, because now they won't be able to recycle and have those certain kind of cards that they need to get so easily because Airlifter. The deck, I feel like they did the most dirtiest for no reason whatsoever on the ban list is Rika, my boys. So this easily has to go in the pay the bills category. Unfortunately, Rika got hit twice on the new ban list because they took away both of the Link 1s, and now the deck is drastically just dead. I don't see this deck getting any more plays. Sword Soul, my boy, so I don't have much hope for this deck going forward. I love this deck to death. I played it all the time online, and it definitely brought me the most fun, if not any, throughout 2023. But what this deck is capable of now, I don't think it has what it takes to be that competitive no more. It's still really fun, but with the new ban list out, I felt like this deck got a lot weaker, and I don't have much hopes for this deck going into the new meta. It can make crazy big boards, but with Mind Control and Change of Hearts, that's not really going to be changing too much because I can just take all your monsters, and Sword Soul don't really have much response to that. So the ban list definitely hit Sword Souls a lot in a way I feel like players did not really see, and because of that, I'm going to have to put Sword Souls unfortunately in the King of Locals, my boys. And I feel like they're going to have to go right there behind Exo Sister because they are still an extremely fun and competitive deck. Don't sleep on it. Get them while you can. Now, if you want to, they are still very affordable, but I don't see them getting better anytime soon, unfortunately. So now we finally got Tearlaments. Tearlaments was like the #1 for the longest time, top tier, Rescue Ace, Unchained, Lab, and Tearlaments. And Tearlaments, I feel like it's a deck that's just like never gonna die. It's just like you take one thing away from it, and my boys, you're gonna find that one player who's just gonna grab a few cards from somewhere else, throw it in there, make it work, and do some crazy board breaking with this deck. I feel like the potential for this deck is always going to be there, but at the moment I'm not feeling it going into the new meta with that ban list hit, and the way I see the new meta is changing consistently. It definitely took a major hit from that ban list, and I don't know if it's going to be able to recover. You can definitely have some splashable engines in this deck and it can pop off when it can, but I feel like it's not going to be nowhere as competitive as it used to. But I still have to give it credit when credit's due, and I will definitely put it up here. I just feel like Tearlaments maybe a little back here. Nah, I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to put it right here. Right behind Infernoble. I feel like Infernoble is actually a little bit more harder. Tearlaments is actually a little bit more easier deck to navigate if you know what you know. It definitely takes big brains just like Infernoble, but I feel like it still deserved that spot right there. Maybe even right in front of Pearly actually, so I feel like that's a lot better. Unchained, the #1 deck this past year, dominated the meta along with the Rescue Ace, and it was just like the untouchable deck. You had Unchained, you know what you're going up against, and you just like scoop immediately if you were not running a tier 1 deck. But with that being said, my boys, Unchained finally got hit really, really bad. I feel like a lot of people's not realizing how bad that hit was to the deck, but it definitely knocked that deck down, and I feel like it knocked it down all the way to better luck next time. It's still going to be running #1, of course, because it's still a good deck. It has a lot of outs to it, and it has a lot of capability, but now the deck's going to be a lot slower. You're going to have to pick your lines very, very carefully. I definitely feel like the hit to Unchained was needed, in my opinion, because this deck was just unstoppable, and just to get that little hit to slow it down was perfect, because now Rescue Ace is slowed down, but not to the point where I feel like personally it deserves tier 2, but Unchained is now tier 2. And Rescue Ace, I would put it down to tier 2, but with the new fire supports coming out and Bonfire, I feel like this deck definitely got the support it needed, it to still stay at tier 1. Vanquish Soul is a deck I really always wanted to play. I love this deck and I love the artwork on some of the cards too, but I don't think it has what it takes to be competitive much anymore. I'm still gonna be putting it, I'm gonna be putting Vanquish Soul maybe like right here, right behind Runic, because it still has a lot of potential. The deck's still very fun. It's not the hardest, but it definitely takes a good pilot to go ahead and play this deck right, and it can definitely get you some W's. Do not sleep on this deck whatsoever. I guarantee you go up against a Vanquish player who knows how to play this deck, you're gonna not realize how good this deck could possibly be. But with that being said, it doesn't have what it takes to be tier 1 or tier 2 at the moment, so I feel like this is the perfect spot for it. And Dark Soul, my boys, Dark Soul, I feel like too many players just having too much copium with this deck. I love this deck from the moment Dark Souls came out so many years ago. I still have some of my Dark Soul cards now, but I feel like this deck is not as good as people say it is. If it was, you'll be seeing it in YCS and hitting top ranks. I definitely think Dark Souls is a very good, fun deck, but I don't think it's as good as people are making it out to be. So I feel like I'm gonna have to put it maybe like right here, right in front of Sword Soul, is a nice sweet spot. Dark Souls definitely got some good cards, it got some nice support, but at the moment there's nothing looking forward to the future that's expected to make this deck even better, and I feel like this deck is just a little too slow and inconsistent for my liking. So with that being said, I feel like it's a perfect spot right there in King Locals, because you're gonna have fun, you're gonna get some W's, but you're not gonna be doing anything crazy or breaking any major boards. Heavy Samurai, my boys. Oh my god, another machine deck I absolutely love. When this deck came out, I basically lived on this deck for the longest time. I absolutely love Heavy Samurai. I know there's some potential cards you can splash into this deck going forward into 2024. I'm curious to see how the play styles are going to work for this deck and what players are going to do. If this deck does see a lot more plays and the new lines are a lot better, I most likely will be jumping into it and getting my cards. But as of now, I don't see there's really much any hope for them. So I feel like I'm going to have to put them right here, because it's still a playable deck. It's just not the best deck. So just pay the bills, my boys, because I mean, I don't see you getting any W's anytime soon. And I can kind of say the same thing for Sprite as well. They dominated the meta for a very short time, and I feel like they did not get the spotlight they needed long enough. And because of that, I feel like they definitely need to go down here to just pay the bills. I definitely think they're way better than Heavy Samurai. The deck is very fun and still very playable, but I don't really see you doing anything too crazy. If anything, I'm honestly looking at this right now would think maybe Sprite could go right behind Sword Soul. I think that's more of a better look. It's nothing too crazy. You're not going to be breaking any boards. It's a very fun deck with a lot of splashable engines, so you could pop some plays off pretty well, but you're not going to be doing anything crazy or catching anybody off guard too well. Sky Striker, my boys. So Sky Striker is just, I feel like this deck had its time when it was here years ago, and now it's, I can't even remember the last time I've seen a Sky Striker player. They were everywhere and now they're nowhere. So with that being said, I'm putting in as pay the bills, because I don't think this deck has really what it takes to really be that competitive anymore, and you don't see nobody playing them for a reason. Gold Pride. I have a serious love for Gold Pride and Plunder Patrols. With that being said, I feel like they go, I can't really judge the deck too much on its individuality, but if you put it together with Gold Pride and Punk together, I feel like that deck's an amazing deck. Definitely fun. I would have put it a lot higher on this list if I could, but I know what this deck is capable of, and I feel like if I have to put them both individually, they may be on the pay the bills, but I'm gonna rank them as together, and I'm gonna put Gold Pride and Punk right here along with Sprite, because they basically all three play together in the same era of the meta, and they're all three really good. But where the meta currently stands right now, I don't see them doing anything crazy. They're still very fun, very playable deck. Alright, broski, so that is my 2023 Christmas tier list predictions going into 2024. There's a lot of good and bads going into it. These are just some of the decks I just wanted to talk about. There's, of course, a lot of decks that I could add on this list. I will, of course, update the list, add those decks on, or make an entire tier list separate for those decks in the future going forward, but these are just my 2 cents going into 2024, what I expect it to be. So on that note, if there's anything else you guys want to see or any decks you guys want me to mention, just let me know. Don't forget to smash that subscribe and like button, hit that post notification, and as always, I'll catch you on the flip side.